in their communities. And so I think that really reflected in that draft, and I think that just with those three picks
Mm-hmm.
really shows some a good approach. And then I'll just say on the day three, he did then move back in the draft, got more draft capital, and then took a lot of guys that had a lot of high athletic ability and guys that you're hoping can develop into role players or maybe even starters with some good coaching. And so overall, I thought the approach in the draft was really good, and I was really satisfied with it.
That's really good. I think you comment really interesting things, right? We want to comment, and I had before this program, I had some questions about what do you think that it would be more like a necessity for the Bears if make more trades or ads in the draft for the defense or the offense. Huh? And I think you made a right analysis, and you can see in the first picks that most or the first pick and defensive picks, sorry, and then the wide receiver. So what do you think now that we are in this moment of the year that it's a trade time of the year? What do you think that the Bears need right now to become or be a competitive team that you can go to playoffs or do something important this year?
I think setting the expectation for this year at playoffs is maybe a little bit beyond what the capabilities of this team is this year. I think rebuilding is a good way to put it. I've been calling it a gap year. I think it's something that they needed to reset where they were at in terms of salary cap. They needed to be able to restock with draft picks. And so at the current roster as it stands and with the current salary cap and available funds for this year, I don't really see them making any sort of I don't see them making the moves necessary to make this a team that looks like a playoff team on paper. This still looks like a team that's probably going to be maybe fun, maybe pesky, maybe someone that, is annoying to play, but I think in general
Hmm.
they probably lack the talent on paper to say like, oh yeah, that team looks like it can be a wild card team. Now, I'm not saying that can't happen.
Yeah.
That can certainly happen, especially if Justin Fields takes the leap that we all want him to take, and maybe some of these role players end up paying off, and they look like, hey, these guys actually got some juice,
Yeah.
right? The defense coalesces around a new scheme, and you've got new players on the back end. Like, there's a lot of things that could happen, but for all of those things to line up in a way that results in a high win total is something that I think Bears fans would do best for their own mental health if they come in to the season with the expectation of it being a fun, pesky kind of year as you rebuild and get to know new
Hmm.
players, not one that's going to result in a playoff run and contending for a championship. Now, what do they need to do next year to maybe put themselves in that position? I think that with a first round draft pick, maybe it's going to be a higher pick. You're probably going to be looking at that premium wide receiver market early on to give Justin Fields that number one wide receiver that would really take that receiving core to the next level. I think that's everything's setting up for that to happen. You also have a ton of cap space opening up next
Hmm.
year. And so whatever the free agent market gives to you, you could see adding a premium offensive lineman if you don't feel like you have it in house yet. If that
Hmm.
didn't pan out, and you could probably look at adding a tight end, either through the
Hmm.
draft or in free agency if something like that presents itself. And so there are a lot more pathways available to making this roster look like a playoff team starting
Hmm.
next offseason.
Yeah. You said really two or three topics that I wanted to discuss today in our show. First is Justin Fields. Obviously, nobody understood well from here. In my opinion, I didn't understood why the general manager last year. I don't know if you were, because Nagy used to be one of these head coach that or you love it or you hate it. I don't know which one are you in of your last head coach, but a lot of people didn't understand why he continuously had chosen uh, Andy Dalton in this case, or many other quarterbacks for being a starting when you were seeing that another franchises, maybe like the Patriots was the most obvious case, or maybe the Jets, or you are having tons of examples in the last years that you can have in the first year competitive quarterbacks. So what do you think? What is your analysis of these of last year uh, Fields supplants or not being a starter?
I think it was a mistake by Matt Nagy. I mean, I wasn't Matt Nagy's biggest fan by any stretch of the imagination. I never felt like he showed that he could put together an offense that made a lot of sense week in and week out. I think that the first year was, uh, I think, credited to probably an assistant that wasn't there the next year, I think is
Yeah.
really kind of what happened. But I think the plan with Justin Fields didn't make any sense last year. And I think that they signed Andy Dalton to a contract. Now they should have waited it out and signed him the previous year and not
Hmm.
traded for Nick Foles. But that was again Ryan Pace being a little too aggressive, not understanding the marketplace. And so when they signed Andy Dalton and they told him, "Hey, we're bringing you on as the starter," um, that should have been thrown out the window once they made the move up to draft Justin Fields because it's way more important to get Justin Fields ready. Now, when I was at camp, Justin Fields had 0 reps with the first team. They were running it all with Andy Dalton, who is a veteran who
Yeah.
should know how to run offenses without full reps. But they gave Andy Dalton all the first team reps and they did not give Justin Fields those reps. Now, when Andy Dalton got hurt, which happens in the NFL, people get hurt
Yeah.
all the time. It was very clear that Justin Fields was not really ready
Hmm.
because he just did not have those reps. He never had a rapport built with Allen Robinson. Now Allen Robinson was doing his own thing and kind of taking his own path out of Chicago. But it was very clear that Fields was not fully prepared, and that's really on the coaching staff. And I'm that really signed his pink slip. That to me was Nagy's done here. And I think he just took the wrong approach. I think he took the approach, I have to win a certain number of games. I need to do it with Andy Dalton, and I'll worry about Fields next year. And that's just not how it played out.
Yeah. In from the perspective, when we saw that Nick Foles, in my opinion, most of you know that I'm a Jaguars fan. Nick Foles did not work in Jaguars. I think he never performed, like people was expecting to in the all his years. But who knows? It's a guy that he make a incredible playoffs with the Eagles. Maybe was an interesting movement. When I heard it, yeah, I thought it's an interesting movement. But you're having a tool that's saying that um, Justin Fields. Then you have that it's an interesting young option. And then you have a veteran like it's Nick Foles, but then Andy Dalton, that it's coming. If I'm not wrong, from Dallas was coming to make kind of a supplancy of Dak Prescott. Uh, Nobody understood that. Why do you have 3 options that are not convincing, but not that bad? You are not having like maybe an option that you are having like I always say the same case like maybe Kansas. You have the first game, you have Mahomes, and then you have a really bad. Oh, sorry for this second, really bad saying that, but not a real second option. So why do you think they make this decision of having 3 possible options and not investing on saying Justin Fields, you coming to make an incredible last year on Ohio State, go and make this great and incredible first year with good tools, because we are going to talk about later. I think Chicago had really good receivers, also running. The running players were not that bad, good enough. So what do you think they didn't choose in a first way to this young quarterback?
Well, I think that you have to remember that all these things are tied with contracts and then the timing of the NFL calendar. So you had Nick Foles, which was the previous season where they went out and they acquired him from Jacksonville, which was
Mhm.
a terrible move that I panned on my podcast
Yeah,
repeatedly at the time. I hated the idea that they gave up capital and that they gave him guaranteed
a lot
money.
of money, if I'm not wrong, right? A lot of
Yeah,
money.
a lot of money. It was just silly. But they acquired him with the intent that he would start over Mitchell Trubisky. He didn't at first. The Trubisky won the job out of camp because and so I think that started Nagy and Foles off on a bad footing. Foles came in. in that game against Atlanta and won that job. The offseason, they let Trubisky go, but there was a bad relationship between Nagy and Foles. And so they had no interest in starting either of those guys. They wanted to
Mhm.
start somebody else. And so they signed Andy Dalton, who, Bengals 1 year with the Cowboys. They should have just waited for Andy Dalton to come free the year before, but they again that was that piece where I talked about they got impatient.
Mhm.
So they signed Dalton with the intent of, I think, either trading Foles or just eating the contract and having him sit on the bench. But the ownership really pushed the general manager. Hey, you got 1 more year. You got to get the quarterback situation figured out. And so I think signing Andy Dalton was always the secondary option, probably to Ryan Pace's mind, that I'm going to go get this guy, this high level draft pick, and so that they traded up to get him. I think at some point their communication broke down along the way, and Matt Nagy felt like he needed to win a certain number of games. This is all speculation on my part and putting the
Yeah.
pieces together. But he felt like a veteran would have fewer risks associated with running his offense at a competency level that he felt like he could squeeze enough wins out of, that he would get a chance to then develop Justin Fields the next year. And he was using and sitting back on the approach that they used for Patrick Mahomes when he was in Kansas City. So Patrick
Mhm.
Mahomes only played one game
Yeah.
in his rookie year. It was the last game of the year. The Chiefs had already clinched a
Yeah.
bye in the playoffs, right? So in his mind, he was going to do the exact same thing. He wasn't going to rush Justin Fields onto the field. He was going to bring him along slowly, like he did Patrick Mahomes, but he read the room wrong. That's not, you didn't have Alex Smith under center
Yeah.
and, and who could operate at a high level. You had a replacement level starter or top backup playing in Andy Dalton. And so he just read the room wrong. And I think he overestimated his capabilities as a coach.
So definitely, this is the year for Justin Fields, right?
Absolutely.
What do you think? You have expectations of him? What do you think? Do you think it's going to be have a good year, tough year? And what do you think about it?
Yeah, I think that when you look at what your expectations should be for Justin Fields, is you would like to see him cut down on the catastrophically bad plays. I think there were a lot of plays that were just really bad. Like
Yeah.
he had a lot of fumbles. He made some throws that he probably shouldn't have. You want to see improvement on reducing the number of bad plays, and then you want to see if he can be more consistent in those flash plays that you see. I mean, then he can make every throw on the field, and then he is big and fast and just overall one of the most athletic people that are on the field at any given time. And so you want to see him be able to understand when to unleash that, when he needs to scramble or when he needs to buy time to throw downfield. You want to see him make good decisions when he's playing within the structure and taking those long shots, but also take the layups, right? That be willing to say, you know what, I don't need to have that throw there. I can just cut it down here and take 7 yards. And so I think it's learning the balance. He's not going to lead the league in passing or anything like that this year. He's learning a new offense, but you want to see him cut down on the bad plays, string together more good plays, and see if he can have more consistency in his game. And that is a successful year if he's able to do that.
I think so. I think so. I think I have watched him really much in his last year in I think it's in Ohio State, and in my opinion, yeah, last year draft was a quarterback draft. I remember a lot of discussions of Trey Lance, the 49ers going for Trey Lance and not Justin Fields, and making crazy things, changing if I'm not wrong, their first and I don't know how many rounds for going to Trey Lance. That is even a stranger case than yours. I think the 49ers, they have a really curious situation because I think, like you said before, maybe they have a closer situation than the Kansas of the first year of Mahomes, because they have a not too bad quarterback that is Garoppolo. That they don't know how to do it, but he always arrives to playoffs. And it's true that they have a more compensating team. They have a lot of tools, but honestly speaking, last year I think Chicago made a good decision. I don't know, and that was a topic that, in your opinion, if you were, you had the options of choosing Trey Lance, uh, uh, Lawrence from the Jaguars, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, on Justin Fields, would you choose again Justin Fields?
I think for me, Lawrence and Fields are 1 and 2, and I don't see any reason to change that. I think Wilson has a lot of issues with. He didn't really have a lot of competition
Yeah,
in
in the last years.
college
Yeah.
that made me feel good. He had the off-platform throw, as they call it, where he can kind of create with that arm talent, and so that always a little scared me a little bit. There wasn't as much to his game to be confident about, and he's also a very slight individual. He's
Yeah.
not well built, and so that would kind of worry me. Trey Lance didn't really play football, during his last year in college, and he played at a smaller level competition. You have to really worry about just how far he needs to
Yeah.
come, and then you feel like you're probably capped somewhat at Mac Jones's ceiling just from an athletic ability standpoint. I think he's better than most people think.
Hmm.
I think he got kind of downplayed based on some of the athletic marvels that are there. But I mean, for me, I would probably maybe take the upside of Lance over that, but also I could understand if you wanted the surety to Mac Jones. But for me, it's Lawrence and Fields 1 and 2, and it was that way all the way leading up to the draft. And at some point, this
Yeah.
narrative started dropping Justin Fields. So the reality is that those two guys really did go back and forth on boards and in people's minds a long time. Now they have different strengths, they have different weaknesses. I like Trevor Lawrence a lot. I think he's got a lot of talent. I
Yeah.
think that Justin Fields probably has more talent in some places that it's going to be a lot of fun to watch him develop. I think he's got a better arm, but I also think that
Yeah.
the processor on just the way that he sees the field and is able to process the plays and understand where to go with the ball. I think Lawrence is a little more advanced. And so it could be really fun if those two guys both develop out of this class as, elite quarterbacks, and that's fine
Hmm.
too. You don't have to have the number one,
Yeah.
to be good and to go where you want to go. And so to me, those two guys are still the two guys that I think are the top of the class.
Yeah, me too. For me, both. For me, it was really strange when San Francisco went to pick Trey Lance for the reason you say. He was a guy who wasn't playing at the top level in the last year. So I was kind of having a lot of doubts about the decision of choosing this guy. But you see, like a lot of players in the first round, you have a lot of impact from players from the first and second round. I would say that you have a lot of players. I would say wide receivers in this case that you have in the second round. You see like players in the last year, like maybe Justin Jefferson from the Vikings. That he I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was second round, and it
It was
had
a late first round pick,
a late third round. Yeah, third,
late
13
late
pick.
first round.
Yeah, late first round.
Mhm.
So, but he had, if I'm not wrong, I think Philadelphia, and I don't know who else had previous wide receiver picks in the same year. I think Rigor has been selected before for the Eagles. So you're saying that you have a lot of wide receivers, a lot of high impact players in the first year, and you see the case this year. It's true that he was a early first round in the case of Jamar Chase in the Bengals last year. I'm not going to say that all the impact of the change from being one of the worst teams one year to the best team is thanks or because of Jamar Chase, but you see how a team like Cincinnati that nobody expected came from last year from being one of the worst teams to one of these of one a Super Bowl contender. So, what do you think that the Bears need to make this change from becoming? Would you select wide receiver now? Would you select better defense? What do you think that are the best things that you need to transform this team?
Well, I think, to defend Ryan Poles not taking a wide receiver earlier. Now he did
Yeah,
take one in the third round, but to defend
yeah,
not taking George Pickens, I don't think that George Pickens checked the boxes that he wanted in terms of character. I think there were things that were at least questioned publicly that we don't know all of the background of these players, but there was at least enough to where I would imagine that Ryan Poles was a little hesitant, and George Pickens dropped further than what most people thought because of it. And so he's not going to rush to take a guy that he's not really confident in. But also the athletic ability and the ceiling of those guys that were available with those second picks weren't they were a tier down from what those first round draft picks were. So this year passing on or waiting until Velus Jones in the third round to take a wide receiver and what he projects to be in the NFL, it makes sense to me given the draft capital. Now, if you're talking about next year, it makes a lot of sense if you're going to use that first round pick on another talented wide receiver class that is likely to come out. There are a lot of really good players that will be available. From what we can tell at
Hmm.
this point, a lot can change, right? And guys can get injured, or maybe not have the great season that they wanted to, and end up going back to college. That's happened plenty. So, but what we can project right now, there's going to be another talented crop of wide receivers that'll be available in the first round. Makes a lot of sense for the Bears to be able to take one of those guys, or maybe one of those guys comes available in free agency that has some professional experience, and a team's not willing to pay them or they can't afford them, and so maybe the
Yeah,
Bears can fit them in that way. But yeah, it makes sense to add the pass catching positions, either a tight end to go with Cole Kmet, or to add
yeah,
a wide receiver to really anchor that unit. That makes the most sense to address in the next off season. But I mean, Justin
yeah,
Fields can still be effective this year, and the Bengals are a tough case. Like Joe Burrow
yeah,
tore his ACL early on in his first year, and that's why they were bad, was because Joe
yeah,
Burrow didn't play.
yeah.
So
It's obviously,
that's
it's
part of it
obviously,
too.
yeah,
And right now we just need to see a healthy Justin Fields, and watch him progress. That's the most important part this year.
yeah. And commenting this thing about wide receivers, I think it's a thing that the league. I don't know your opinion on that. And going out a little bit from Chicago, you're saying like crazy or market this year, this free agency has become a little bit strange, or become a strange situation. You see Jacksonville Jaguars uh, paying, I don't remember the quantity, but a huge amount of money for in my opinion, an average wide receiver like it's Christian Kirk, a guy that was not a first, I think was not a first or a second or third choice for 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 Arizona last years. So I don't know your opinion right now in this crazy wide receiver market that you see that it's now or never. All teams need and look like crazy for getting, I don't know, deep wide receivers, pocket wide receivers, powerful wide receivers. I don't know if what's your opinion about these late, or well, now it's 1 month ago, trades, or or hirings from like teams like maybe like Raiders. For me, in my opinion, was extraordinary case. I think they the case of Adams, uh they make playoff, not playoff, but Super Bowl contenders. They have a really good team. So I don't know your opinion in other cases that you see that maybe more average um, wide receiver had been paid like top ones. So it's maybe a warning, a signal, a warning of certain uh, for all of your teams, like Chicago or other teams that they may need a wide receiver on the team.
I think that one of the things, there's a couple things there. One is you don't want to get caught up in the raw numbers, right? The raw numbers are really big, especially to guys like you and me. I don't know what you do for a living, but I certainly don't make $1 million a year. So when I see
No,
players making, $20 million a year, that's insane, right? So I think that the numbers keep going up because the salary cap keeps going up. So what you want to do is you want to avoid thinking about it in terms of the overall number, the raw number. The way to look at it is the percentage of the cap. And when you look at percentage of the cap over time, they're not that far off. And some guys made more than that. Like Larry Fitzgerald was making a higher percentage of the cap when
yeah,
he was with Arizona during his career, and Calvin Johnson, he was making a higher percentage on the cap with the Lions than a lot of these guys are signing these big deals. So they're not historically, out of line. Now, there are the wide receivers are in some ways more important, because you need at least three of them to to uh,
yeah,
to really run a modern offense. But there's also a greater supply of them, and so I wouldn't be surprised if there are a lot of teams that aren't going to invest in a top dollar number one wide receiver, and would prefer to trade them away and see if your offensive system can lift that boat. So, Kansas City saying, hey, we need to allocate our resources elsewhere. We're going to trade away Tyreek Hill. We can't afford to pay him. We're going to take that draft capital and we're going to invest that elsewhere. We're going to reinvest that in the wide receiving core to try to replicate what he can do, with cheaper contracts. I think that's something that you have to keep in mind, that there's going to be multiple approaches to that. the Bears would be wise to add that number one wide
Hmm.
receiver prospect, because nothing's guaranteed, but to add that wide receiver one prospect in next year's draft, that's a cheaper contract than this, $20 million madness.
Yeah.
And probably keep adding wide receiving talent, along the way, so that you can continue to have a competitive roster. But to worry about, Darnell Mooney, what you're going to
Hmm.
pay him, you're either going to pay him what you think he's worth within the system, or you're going to let him walk in free agency or maybe trade him away. But he's not a Devontae Adams type of
Yeah.
guy, so you don't necessarily have to worry about that. But it's all, to me, you got to kind of start thinking about it in terms of percentage of the cap and not so much the dollars.
Yeah.
And
That's
I would probably be the type of general manager that would prefer to get the draft capital back and continue to draft these talented young players that keep coming out, because the growth of 7-on-7 leagues in the United States, where they're playing flag football like all year round, has just increased the number of quality quarterbacks and the number of quality wide receivers and pass catchers
hmm.
throughout the collegiate ranks. And so I think you're going to continue to see really good athletes come out in the draft year after year to fill that in. So to me, I think the supply that's coming in from college is much greater than the need to give out giant contracts.
Yeah, and I see the last year, picks from several teams. You see that you need to invest more in drafts, but you see teams, short-term thinking teams, like maybe the case of Los Angeles, from the champions of last year, that they are. If I'm not wrong, the first pick of this year was the 100 or the 99th pick of the draft, but they're still champions. And you see last year's teams investing a lot on the present and not in the future. I think it's different case at like Chicago or another, teams that they need more in general players that they don't have a focus necessity. But I would I would ask you honestly, if you had the choice or the option to choose one of the actual free agency wide receivers for the Bears, what would be the first option?
I wouldn't have taken. I certainly wouldn't have paid Christian Kirk that money, right? So to me, I didn't really see the value of spending a lot in free agency. Most of those guys got re-signed by their teams, or the trade market was a little bit more
Yeah,
active. I probably would have made the deal for Mari Cooper. I can't remember what the trade
yeah,
compensation was, but it was pretty reasonable, and his
yeah,
contract is pretty reasonable.
yeah. I think
There
so.
was no way that they were going to sign Allen Robinson, um, given his 2021 in Chicago. So he was probably one of the more talented players that was
Yeah.
available, but he certainly wasn't going to re-sign in Chicago anyway, even if they wanted him
Mhm.
to. So I wasn't really thrilled with the talent available at wide receiver, and I knew that they really couldn't afford much with their salary cap information situation anyway. So I wasn't too surprised.
Yeah, I'm agree with you. I'm agree with you because I'm seeing the cases like teams that you see a lot of surprises, like maybe going, like in this draft, the case of AJ Brown for the Eagles going. There are things that you don't expect to. You think that players they will stay in their team, and then you see like players like you said, like Allen Robinson, like leaving and going to another team. You see because they think in the short term, but going to the another thing that I wanted to do with you, JB, is analyze your calendar. If you see your calendar and talking, about your division and everything, you see that it's not, in my opinion, it's not a tough calendar. I don't know what do you
Hmm.
think about it. Uh, do you think that they are complicated? I don't know. What's your opinion about it?
I think this, you know, trying to predict the NFL schedule in preseason is always a dangerous thing, right? Because so many things can happen.
Yeah,
Players can get
that's true.
injured. Teams can improve that you don't expect. But sure, I think by most metrics, it, I think the best way to think about it is the over under win expectations for the
Yeah,
teams that are on your schedule. It's a little bit more accurate than last year's win percentage, and the Bears' schedule is maybe a little easier than
and
average, and
another
so
ones. Yeah.
that's fine. That's great. There are going to be games that are going to be competitive for the Bears, and they can get some victories, right? They're almost certainly not going to look at a winless season. There's going to be games where they're going to be, competitive from the start, and there's probably going to be some games that maybe don't look that winnable right now that will be when you get to them on the calendar. But I think that in general, every NFL season is a little different. There are teams that you feel pretty strong will be good, and then there's teams that you feel pretty confident that won't be. But it's like a bell curve. Most teams are really in the middle. That 83% is within one standard deviation of average, right? That's
Hmm.
I think a lot of NFL teams are like that, where they're okay, and if things are going well
Yeah,
for them, they can beat anybody, and if they foul bounces a weird way, they could lose to pretty much anybody. That's most
yeah,
NFL teams, and so I do think that their their division is likely going to still be dominated by Green Bay. That
yeah.
there's no one
Me
that
too. Yeah,
necessarily can challenge them there. But Minnesota's in a little bit of a weird reload year.
yeah,
The Lions look like they're getting a little better in terms of building what they want to get. But are they better than the Bears now? I don't know, maybe, but it's not the scariest division other than Green Bay.
yeah. I think so. I think so. I'm this kind of guys that I always like to say crazy things at the beginning of the season, and then when the season ends, I said so. I say a lot of crazy and stupid things, maybe, but then I should bet. I should bet maybe last year that the Bengals were going. I didn't say. I didn't expect the thing of the Bengals last year, but I think and if I would you know maybe bet something, I believe in the that the Lions are going to. I don't know why, but I have a good feeling of the Lions because I don't these teams that being really really small, really bad, really they don't have like that a bad team, for losing all games or almost all games last year, and all the games they lost. I remember most of them were of one or two. The 6 points to 12 points, but not more, or 3 points, not more than that. They were close to win. I don't remember, but they were really close to win 3 or 4 games. And I think, honestly speaking, that Jared Goff, I know that everybody hates him, but we need to remember he was a first overall draft pick. He played not that bad on the first season. He arrived to a Super Bowl that he made it really bad. I remember this Super Bowl because we all were against the Patriots this Super Bowl, I think. But I think you have a really competitive uh, uh, division. And honestly speaking, I think that there are going to be a lot of surprises. I believe that this year the Green Bay Packers are not going to do it well. I think these Davante Adams loss. I think they are. I think Rogers is giving a lot of problems over the last years. I think his mentality. I don't know. I don't honestly speaking. I don't like this guy because I think his mind is not a team. I think the Vikings have an extraordinary team, and one of these years it's going to be Vikings year. For me, in my opinion, they should be in playoffs. They have extraordinary team. You see overall defense, offense. I think they have a good team, maybe excepting Cousins, maybe, and maybe the Lions. They can surprise with these new draft picks. In my opinion, the first, the second. If I'm from me being Jaguars fan, I would select 1,000 maybe times the guy from Detroit, and maybe the guy from, I don't remember the names. I have a lot of names in my head, but the guy from Jacksonville right now. So I think you have a division for having a lot of surprises this year. I don't know your opinion about it. Do you think the Vikings are playoff contenders? Do you think that the Packers are still this top tier without Davante Adams? Do you think the Lions can make something?
Well, I hope you're right that the Packers aren't going to be very good, but I think the
I think
reality is
so.
that their roster is very strong and they have a guy
Yeah,
that
yeah,
has played, he's the two-time defending MVP. So
yeah.
it's
Did it?
it's hard to get past that, Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he's kind of a weird guy for sure, and to go to a retreat and eat nothing but clarified butter for a week is maybe one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life, but he's good at football. right? And
Yeah,
it's tough to deny that. And until he stops showing how good he is at football, that team's going to be competitive, and they're the team to beat. The Vikings, I don't think are as good, but I personally just don't know that they're trying to compete this year. I'm not sure, but I think as long as Kirk Cousins is their quarterback, I don't think that they
yeah,
can really do much. Now the NFC is weaker, the weaker conference, right? So the AFC has much
yeah,
better talent. They have much
yeah.
higher quarterback play, and so could they make the playoffs? Sure. Yeah. I mean, they're going to be in a lot of 50-50 games where the ball bounces their way. Great, but I don't believe in Kirk Cousins.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
me
believe in
neither.
Jared Goff less than I believe in Kirk Cousins. Jared Goff is, maybe he's the 20th best quarterback in the league, but that might be nice. He has to have everything clean in front of him. He's not a guy that can really create much. Um,
No,
and I don't know that the Lions have built up their receiving talent enough to lift him up to a position. Now, he's a guy that can play competent level quarterback play in the NFL. I'm not saying he's not at that level, but he's not even
that's all.
above Kirk Cousins, and I think you need to be at least Derek Carr level to
No,
be able to go somewhere. And I think both of those guys are below Derek Carr, so I'm not really that high
much
on
below,
either one.
much below.
Right.
Don't you? Do you think now that you mentioned Derek Carr, do you think he's in the maybe top 5, top 10 in the
Definitely not
quarterback
top
position?
five.
No,
I think Derek Carr is a guy that's probably around 10 or 12 without really
really?
thinking about it too much. But I mean, you have again Rodgers until he proves otherwise, and you have Tom Brady until he decides that he's not going to be defying
Yeah,
father
which is
time.
sell or something,
Okay,
you know?
so you have to at least mention those two guys. But the younger guys, you have Mahomes. No question about Mahomes being
No,
number one overall in my mind.
not much. Yeah,
And then I think you would put Justin Herbert up there. He's shown absolutely to be just an absolute stud. And early on in his career, so I'm fascinated to see where he goes. Joe Burrow is just in a Super Bowl.
yeah,
Beat those guys. So that's a top five right there. And I'm not even talking Lamar Jackson, who brings such
yeah,
an ace ability in the run game. I'm just sorry, I'm just off the top of my head, but I know I'm missing a couple obvious ones too.
yeah,
But that to me is those guys are well above a Derek Carr. Russell Wilson, I know Russell didn't
yeah,
have the greatest year last year because he had a little thumb injury, but I'd still put Russ above
yeah,
those guys.
yeah. I think so. And you didn't mention. I'm forgetting the name. I have today. I have bad day. The Buffalo Bills won. I'm forgetting the
Oh,
name.
Josh
How's it?
Allen, of course, yes.
Josh Allen.
Josh
Yeah,
Allen would be a top five
yeah,
guy for sure.
yeah.
Yep, absolutely.
I think like I think yesterday. I don't know who mentioned or who posted in the Instagram or in the ESPN. They're top 5 quarterback in the league, and they were not included in this list. Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow. This is for me. It's a crazy thing and a complete mistake. I know your opinion about it, but for me, Justin Herbert, if I would be any team, for me would be one of the top, maybe yeah, 5 would be top 5, top 6, maybe quarterbacks. But he's definitely in this top 5. I don't know your opinion about it.
Yeah, and the Chargers happen to be my second team. I, have
Oh,
a
really?
AFC. I've always kind of liked to have another AFC, and the Chargers don't have a lot of fans. But the
No.
Ladainian Tomlinson was one of my favorite players. I started rooting for
Hmm.
them, I guess 20 years ago when he was drafted. So yeah, I've been very excited that Herbert has, because I didn't expect him to be that guy when they drafted him, and he's proven right away. I
Yeah.
don't think it'll be very long before he's a guy that people are talking about as a top three guy consensus wise.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, he last season, if I would, I remember this last game against, I don't know if you remember this last game against, I think were the Riders, that they're both classified by to playoffs, but still the Steelers were out, and then they scored a field goal, they didn't defend it or something really weird, but at the end, the Chargers were out. But I think my opinion was that if the Chargers would have classified for playoffs last year, they would have been a tough rival to play against, more even than the Steelers. I know
Oh,
your
sure.
your your opinion about the Steelers last year. Last year we were a little bit, I don't know, lucky. Let's say this way, but they had the first. I remember they played against in the first game they played against. I don't know who they played. They played against Kansas or no? Who
I
played
think
against?
they played the Chiefs, and it wasn't much of a
Yeah,
game.
Kansas.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I think they got beat by 4 touchdowns or something. So
yeah,
yeah,
something like that. The first part, because I also like the Steelers. It's a team that I always, I also wrote it about it. I also created, some content about it. It's a team that I still like. And last season was surprising about it, but I was really surprising that they were classified by through the playoffs and not were like the Chargers. Chargers is a team that I also like. I also like because it's a team that it's with a lot of history, And but coming back to the Bears, I was analyzing now your calendar. You play twice against the let me see again twice against the Lions.
mhm.
You play also against Jets, Dolphins, Falcons, Washington, Giants, Texans. I think it's not in maybe from a rough idea. It's not a complicated calendar from your. I don't know what. Again, maybe I asked you before, but what do you think about this calendar?
I honestly like I'm not a big predictions guy. That's not my thing. I Again, I think that they have an easier than average schedule just based on a lot of metrics, and I think that's fine. But I am not worried about wins and losses this year. I'm
All right.
worried about individual player evaluations, what they look like as a unit, progress to see if they can string together good performances. If they end up winning some of these games, great. If they end up losing some of those games, okay. Like I'm not too worried about the end results. I'm more worried about
Mm-hmm.
process and I'm worried about progress. That's what I'm focused on this year.
I'm I'm having this because I'm seeing now that we have a lot. Have some, not a lot, but we have some questions.
Sure.
What's your prediction for the? I mean, wins and losses this year for the Bears? Is like you are not predictioner, but people is
I,
like they wanna, they want like
I
these things like.
So the Vegas over under for the Bears last time I checked was 6.5 wins, meaning that they predict that the Bears will
Oh.
win between 6 and 7 games, and I think that that is a fair and accurate prediction. I think that there are some things that could happen where Justin Fields out shows the guy that we want him to be. Some of these secondary pieces coalesce right away, so that defense looks good. The maybe Byron Pringle looks, they stay healthy. That's always an important factor where they could exceed that. They could win 7, 8 games. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are some things that could happen where, the offense takes some time to get off the ground. You get a couple key injuries. They're not a team with a lot of depth. And honestly, they could win 4 games. Like, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Like that, and that possibility is fine. But again, Vegas predicts 6 to 7 games, and I think the range is probably something like probably like 4 to 8, and I think that
Yeah.
that's fair.
That's wide. Yeah.
Um, I mean, what's going to happen week to week and overall, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
7 and 10 sounds fine. I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about what the product looks like on the field.
Yeah. The second question we have here is, what do you think that it's the most dangerous weapon this year for the Bears?
So Darnell Mooney, he's a really good player. He's going to have the opportunity to continue in the wide receiver one in terms of targets. Last year, he had the most targets on the team. He went over 1,000 yards. He's got a really good rapport with Justin Fields. He's a good, solid wide receiver, and I think this new offensive system will feature him and put him in a position to succeed.
Oh yeah, I think so. I really think so. I have here a third question. I think I will have a couple more, but what do you think? This is a social one. What do you think about Mitch Trubisky?
I think that yeah, you know
It's not an easy one. This one.
he doesn't play for the Bears anymore, so I
Yeah.
guess I could just take that route. But I think what happened with Trubisky is that he was drafted too high.
Yeah.
He didn't prove his draft position of where he was at. He certainly didn't deserve to. The Bears didn't should not have traded up and given away draft capital to try to secure his services when you had other guys on the board, Patrick Mahomes being one of them, that they could have just sat there and taken at 3. But that's not his fault. It's not his fault that he was
No.
drafted too high. He didn't really show a lot of the tools that you want in a high draft pick in college, and so it was always a little confusing as to why the Bears pushed that high up to get him. And then he just didn't develop a lot of the things. He didn't look like a natural athlete. Didn't look like a natural quarterback in a lot of ways. I don't think he really understood how to make all the throws. He didn't really read defenses very well, and that didn't really progress. Now, is that Matt Nagy's fault? Probably, but it's also certainly partly Mitchell Trubisky's fault. When they were coming to the end of his 4th year, I predicted that he would sign with Buffalo to back up Josh Allen, for 1-year contract for, darn near quarterback minimum money. And that's exactly what happened. And so that's what the league valued him at last year. And now this year, circumstances change a little bit because you only have so many guys out. Somebody's going to be willing to take a chance. He signs with Pittsburgh, ostensibly as the guy that was basically an Andy Dalton type of guy for the Bears last year, right? Like, well, if they don't get a quarterback in the draft, they're going to roll with Andy Dalton. Well, the Steelers sign Mitchell Trubisky. They say, this is the guy we're going to go with, unless we get a guy in the draft. And of course, they draft somebody in Kenny Pickett. And so to me, Mitchell Trubisky, unless he makes that mental leap and unless he gets a little bit more comfortable with some of the physical aspects of the game, like, for example, he's the worst slider I've ever seen in my life. He doesn't really look like he knows how to get down. It just doesn't look like he knows how to do it. Whereas you watch somebody like Kyler Murray, where he played a lot of baseball, and he's a very natural at that. He just didn't have that. So I don't expect him to play much this year. I think they're going to give that. I think Pickett will probably win the job, and I think Pickett probably should win the job. But he's probably going to be a guy that bounces around if he wants to be a backup or that low level starter, for somebody to try to catch on. But unless he makes that mental leap, that's all he's ever going to be.
Yeah, I think that what you said, the situation you mentioned, the quarterback situation from last year to this year, we had 2 questions more I will ask you after, but let me say that I remember the situation like we said before with the quarterbacks in the first round of the draft last year, and you were seeing like players like Marcus Mariota, or players like Mitch Trubisky that were supposed not don't have a first opportunity again, and you see like, or even players like today had a really bad day. How was he called? This quarterback they played, like the one that has 10 sons and played in the Chargers. How was he called? The name?
Philip Rivers.
Philip Rivers. That's it. Yeah. About Philip Rivers, he was supposed to have another year. Carson Wentz, a lot of maybe quarterbacks that were not supposed to have another options. But you see this year that the situation has changed at all. You see teams like the Falcons. You see like Mariota was Falcon all the time, and they were supposed to give a second chance. Like he had no chance before in Tennessee. That he had a lot of chances. You're the same with Mitch Trubisky. It seems like he's going to have a second chance thanks to this I don't know, say lack of quarterbacks. What do you think that it's going to happen now in the league in terms of quarterbacks? Guys like maybe Matt Ryan in Indianapolis. What do you think about this situation?
Are you asking guys getting second chances, or
Yeah.
just
Sorry, I
quarterback
made
movement?
4 questions in the same
Yeah.
sentence, so it's like I always do that. So sorry about it. Yeah. Do you have these guys that they are having second chances are going to have a real,
I think that the most intriguing are the trades. So the guys that sign, free agents, if for the most part, unless you have like a really wild situation like you had like Peyton Manning signing with the Broncos,
yeah,
or Tom Brady signing with the Bucks. In general, the free agent quarterback thing doesn't really work that often, but
yeah,
the trades are really interesting. So Russell Wilson going to Denver, I think, is fascinating.
yeah,
I'm really excited. That division's awesome. That division
Yeah.
is awesome. I mean, Derek Carr is the worst quarterback in that division,
You
and
think
Derek
so?
Carr is a decent quarterback, right? Like he's the line. So it's amazing to me that's happened, to the AFC West. I think that he'll be really good. I think that Cortland Sutton's in for a big year. It's a really fun skill set to match up with Russ's deep ball ability. And so I'm really excited to see what that looks like in Denver. And Russ is a really easy guy to cheer for.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to see what that looks like. And then I think Matt Ryan in Indy makes a lot of sense. I like a lot of Bears fans don't like talking about Chris Ballard because Chris Ballard was in the Bears system. He's the general manager of the Colts,
Yeah.
and they chose Ryan Pace. The Bears brass chose Ryan Pace over Chris Ballard, even though Chris Ballard was the favorite going into that.
Yeah.
And he got the Indy job a couple years later. And I think he's done a nice job. Now he has not figured out the quarterback position because
No.
they keep starting new quarterbacks. But Matt Ryan's a former league MVP.
Yeah.
He certainly can. He's the number one overall pick. Like he can do a lot of the things that you need a quarterback to do. Now he doesn't have the mobile ability that these
No.
younger quarterbacks have, of course. But I think that given a very strong infrastructure around him, that's a good offensive line. He's got some young wide receivers that I think look like they can absolutely help him out. I think that he's going to have some success. So you have two guys that went from the NFC over to the AFC that makes the AFC even stronger. And I mean,
Yeah.
it would not surprise me if the Colts win that division and they're in the playoffs under Matt Ryan. And
I
the
think
Broncos are certainly going to be competing for a playoff spot as well.
Yeah, I think the league is like I don't understand, or how some, it always happened that some leagues, they have some years they are not compensated, because you see that really players, like, I don't know, like trends, that players go to one division one time and then they go to another. But for me it was really surprising. I told you that I am also a Seahawks fan. For me, Russell Wilson, it's an incredible player. It's a player that was saving the Seahawks from making, horrible season in the last years. I think he didn't play really good. He had bad relationship with Pete Carroll. I don't know. I don't know how he's going. For me, if I would be, in my opinion, for me, it's not the best choice selecting Denver. I don't know if maybe for personal reasons. He's going to have nice weapons. I think nice weapons, but not the best weapons that he could have. Maybe going to another team. I don't know your opinion about it. Maybe being, from his perspective, he could maybe better go to another team. I don't know, like the options that were on the table. What do you think about it?
I mean, at some level, there it takes two, right? Like the team has to also want him and be able to
Pay
send
him,
out,
yeah.
send the draft capital and afford him. I think that he was looking for a way out. And I think he's looking for a team that had a solid infrastructure and that was looking to
Yeah.
win. And I think he got that. And so I think that if he was just getting to point to the team that he would want, I'm sure he would probably have wanted to stay in the NFC. Maybe he wanted to go to a
Yeah.
bigger market. He wanted Chicago last year, right? Like that
Yeah, I
was
remember.
that
I
was the
remember he
rumor,
was
and
the
that
one.
would have now it wouldn't have had the infrastructure that he wanted, but he could have served as the attractive piece for people to want to sign there and go play with him, right? So it would have been a big market for him and his wife to want to settle into and make some endorsement deals. In Denver,
Yeah.
Denver's a growing city, but it's not nearly the market that Chicago is. So I think it's a good spot for him from a football standpoint, from a life standpoint. Denver's beautiful, but
Yeah, it is.
it's not the big city market that probably he wanted.
Yeah.
From a competitive standpoint, to try to make a deep playoff run, he would have wanted to stay in the NFC, but I understand why the Seahawks wanted to get him out of the conference.
Yeah. I understand it too. Even having, the Seahawks, I think I don't know your opinion, but they look like the worst team in their division. I don't know if you agree
Oh
with
yeah,
me now. They
oh yeah,
pretty
they're going
worse.
to
They
be
were the
bad.
worst. They were the worst last year. I don't know. Maybe this we need to, because we have been talking for 1 hour, but we need to talk it another day, because I feel really comfortable talking, and we could talk about the other division, like maybe this division with LA, with Arizona, San Francisco. I don't know. For me, it was maybe the best, if not the best division last year. I think another one was really, really competitive. But I don't know. We could talk about it. But in my opinion, coming back to the trade of Russell Wilson, I don't know if from the perspective of the Seahawks and the perspective of the Broncos, do you think it was a decent trade? Do you think the Seahawks should be happy knowing that there is a new generation, that they are going to all that it's the last years, everything you have done, it's because of Russell Wilson? Would you qualify the trade as a positive for Seattle and for Denver?
For Denver, for sure. Like, that's
Yeah,
the obvious part because you get a bona fide quarterback, you remain competitive in your division, and you take what is a pretty solid roster, and you see what you can get out of it, right? So it's
yeah,
pretty easy to see from that perspective. You have to compete with the Chargers, you have to compete with the Chiefs, you have to compete with the Raiders, who are still at least going to be okay. And so that's a tough division to get out of it. That's the best
yeah, really
division in
tough.
football without any question. So for the Broncos, if they want to remain relevant, then yes, that was absolutely worth it. And the price tag didn't really matter much because you have to try to see what you can get out of this iteration of your squad. For the Seahawks, I mean, it's easy for me to say as someone who doesn't care about the Seahawks that yeah, that was the right decision to make because you're not going anywhere. You get something to help rebuild your future. You get them off the books, and you can move on and you can turn the page. The reality is I don't know what Seahawks fans think. I mean, this is the guy that they, loved for a long time, and he brought him a Super Bowl, and it was within,
Yeah,
a couple yards of another one. And
yeah,
and that's that's a tough pill to swallow. I'm trying to think of the equivalent for a Bears fan. It's is that trading, Walter Payton after the Bears Super Bowl because you say like, well, he's almost done and we can get draft capital for him. I mean, I don't know what the equivalent is in Seahawks history, but it has to be pretty high company for a Seahawks fan to go through that. So I mean I think from a purely analytic standpoint, absolutely makes sense for the Seahawks to do that and move on. From a fan standpoint, I'm sure it's tough.
we're going to end this because this podcast we are almost more than 1 hour, and we don't want to make it much longer. It's late in Spain. It's almost 10 p.m. So it's we see that the level, last 10 minutes it decreased a little bit,
You
the
guys are
level.
just getting ready to go out to dinner now, right? Isn't that how it
Yeah,
works?
yeah, we didn't really late, really late. We in Europe they don't understand that when Germans came, I have as a country, that we are full of English people, Germans, they don't understand it. How we eat lunch at 2 p.m. and dinner at 9:30 p.m. So we are a strange country, but it's because maybe it's a warm country. I don't know. Barcelona is not that warm. I would say that it's not kind of maybe places like in the south that it's I don't understand, but yeah, it's a dinner time, and people maybe it's starting. It's true that it also plays Barcelona now, and the football league it's almost done, so it's nothing much to see. But anyway, it's a nice time. It's a nice time. So if I think earlier for a Sunday would be worse, but anyway, the questions that I wanted to make, if I not forgot, is I'm going to make you two from myself and one from the public. The first one from myself is: do you think that, talking about Seattle, do you think that Drew Lock is a quarterback for starting team?
I don't think they have another option, but he's not very good. So it's he's someone that will play this year that will get you a high draft pick next year.
Second question on myself. I think so. I think so. I think that going for a quarterback this year was a mistake. I think they should. The only thing that they should do is rebuild, knowing that they are going to be the worst team in their division. So they need to rebuild, make a decent season, and make a thing that they are getting these like decent people like me, like the wide receivers don't leave, not to leave, and make kind of a smart movements. Still keep players also like in the field, like Jamal Adams and all these people that still cost you money and draft picks, so to make a decent season. So my second question, if I might not forget, from a Broncos perspective, I remember I heard a lot of about Aaron Rodgers going to Denver, that they like Denver. Denver was kind of like this girl that they have, a lot of boys around, but never goes with never seems like going with a nice man. So what would be your choice between uh, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers in this case?
I mean, I think just given the last couple of years, it's very easy to say Rodgers, and I personally, as a Bears fan, would love to have seen Aaron Rodgers not be on the Packers, and so it's hard for me to not answer that. But if I'm Denver, I'm sure that I made that call multiple times to the Packers. It sounded like they were fairly close to having that deal last year, and that honestly might be why the Bears have Justin Fields, is because the Packers or the Broncos thought that they had a trade with Aaron Rodgers. But to answer your question, I think honestly, I just think that Russell Wilson is a better guy to cheer for. He's a better teammate. He's got a high skill set. He's a hard worker, and I think that he's a better leader of a team. So I think the Broncos came
Yeah.
out just fine.
Yeah, I think so. I actually think so. And this is a question that we have two questions now.
Okay.
We are going to start with the first one that it's people maybe don't know because they are not a Bears fan for so long. Which are your strong rivals? We know that they're from
Okay.
a perspective from another teams. But what would be the first the rivals for the Bears?
Right. So the Bears have been around for over 100 years, right? So they were founded in 1920.
Yeah.
And the Green Bay Packers came into play, in like 1921, 1922. So
Uh-huh.
so they've been around and playing each other twice a year for 100 years, and they are the main rivals together. Now, unfortunately, from a competitive rivalry standpoint, it has not been that in the last
Yeah.
20 years. They've basically, or 30 years, really. The Packers have really dominated the series. They've had two guys that are going to, Hall of Fame quarterbacks, and the Bears, have been lost in the jungle in that regard. And so, honestly, that series has not looked good for the Bears for a very long time. That the
Yeah.
Packers now own the all-time series by a few games. The Bears used to have a huge lead, so that's a frustrating thing. But that is the number one rival. Number two rival is probably the Vikings. The Vikings have been around for a while. Well, or it's the Lions. It kind of depends on who, where
Hmm.
you live and what are the other fans. Where I'm from, there's a pretty good split between Bears, Packers, and Vikings fans. And
Hmm.
so to me, the second rival is the Vikings. But if you're from a different part of the country and you're a Bears fan, you might know more Lions fans, right? And the
Because
Lions have been around
yeah.
longer. Lions have been around, not as long as the Bears, of course, and not as long as the Packers, but they've been around a long time as well. And the Vikings have been around since like 1961, I think. So
Uh-huh.
all
Yeah.
of those teams have been around a long time. They've been in the same division a long time.
Mhm.
So you can form those rivalries, in different ways. It always seems like when the Bears are good, the Vikings are down, and vice versa.
Yeah.
Whereas the Bears and the Lions have been bad together for a
Mhm.
while, or but the Bears own the all-time series against the Lions by quite a lot. So, but those are the divisional teams, the divisional
Yeah.
rivals. Pretty much after that, maybe you just don't like a team for some reason. Like growing up when the Bears were in the '80s, the Bears were pretty good, obviously. But
Yeah.
so were the 49ers. So I grew up kind of hating the 49ers.
Normal. Yeah. Normal. And maybe now people with the Patriots now, maybe like
Right.
over the last 10 years, that people or love or hate the Patriots because they are the team
Sure.
that always play it against. Yeah.
Right.
Because for the people that they don't know, as I explained you on our previous conversations, we are trying to give, better approach to the way that you in the US, you watch games. You are from, for the people that don't know you, you are from White City or
Uh,
you're not from Chicago.
so
You are,
so so Chicago is in the state of Illinois, and
yeah.
then the state next to Illinois to the west is Iowa, and I'm
Yeah.
from that state. My grandfather was born and raised in Chicago,
Hmm.
and my grandfather on my other side was also a Chicago sports fan, but they moved west and settled in the state next to there, and so I get it
Now you're
naturally, but I'm about a 5 hour drive away from Chicago now.
5 hours, 5 hours. Okay.
Mhm.
Because, we got surprised sometimes in Spain because we see the map. The maps are not, how to say, really compensated. When you see a map in the United States, you see a lot of cities that they close. You have a lot of teams, like maybe it's California, it's states, maybe, I don't know, New York. Well, no, New York has any, but New Jersey, or maybe states like they have more, and then you see states they don't have any sports team. So from Iowa, we being completely honest with you, in my case, I don't know, maybe nothing, maybe the caucus of Iowa. It's the only thing that I heard in the news. But it's
Hmm.
it, in these cities, you or in these states that you don't have a football team. How do you do? Because I know that it's complicated, right? because you are 5 hours away. 5 hour away. It's really long distance. Maybe it's the distance we have from Barcelona to Madrid. It's huge distance in Europe, say like 5 hour drive. I don't know in the US, but people from your state, from Iowa, what team do they support?
Yep. It's very well split between the Vikings,
Vikings in the north, right? Maybe
which
Minnesota
is
is in the north. Yeah,
yep, Minnesota, that's the north, the Packers and the Bears. It's really split pretty evenly 3 ways. You'll occasionally get, the a lot of Cowboys supporters.
yeah,
You'll get, if you're out further west, you'll get, some Broncos fans or some Chiefs fans. It's a
yeah.
lot of it's proximity, right? But where I grew up, there's a real even split between those 3 teams in the NFC North.
I never understood. It's a thing that I always try to analyze. Why do the Cowboys had a lot of fans? Do you think that it's the first team in the US with more fans? Do you think so? Maybe the Packers, or what team do you think that it's the first team in terms of number of fans
I
in
think
the
for a
US?
long time it was the Cowboys. They were, they came in, they were successful. They had a celebrity coach and Tom Landry.
Yeah,
This is in the 70s, and they became kind of, America's team was, what they were branded as. And then when Jerry Jones bought them in the 90s and they had a lot of success, they were on a lot. So I think when you're successful, you get more primetime
yeah,
games. Someone that watches, one game a week or 2 games a week, maybe, or 2 games a month or whatever, there's a higher likelihood that they're watching those
yeah,
those teams that are in the national games. So it's not always based on where you live and in the proximity to your teams. It could be your exposure. It can be something from a family member that gets you into it. Someone buys you a toy football as a kid, and it's got
yeah,
team X on it, and that's the team that you end up liking. Or you get one player that played for your college that you like, he gets drafted to this team over here, and that's who you end up cheering for. So I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you can like a team and get involved in it. It's not always geography, but and
yeah.
in the US, a 5 hour drive is not a big deal.
Yeah, I assume that. I assume that because we are planning something for this summer, going to different places, different stadium, and I saw that short distance. It's 3 hours. Is a short distance in the US. So I think, wow, it's a kind of here. Maybe we take a plane for making 3 hours, right? But it's good. One thing I like that you said, that you mentioned, is like you in the US, maybe you are closer. Maybe like in Europe, the people, it's not a fan from obviously we don't have any geographical team in Europe. We have maybe the Jaguars that they come every year to London to play, but we don't have any geographical team. And maybe you are of the team that, maybe in my case, I am a Seahawks fan because the first Super Bowl that I watched was the 49ers again. No, was the year before the Patriots against the Giants. I like any of those teams. Then I watched the Ravens against the 49ers. I started liking the Ravens, but it was a team that was not convincing. This purple color I don't like. Till I see the Seahawks. The Seahawks, I like the bird. I don't know. Yeah, it's true that when I was a kid, my dad bring me a cup of the Seahawks. These two things, they make me be a Seahawks fan. Like, and it's like thing that could happen. You see a team winning, it's easier than being a fan of the Lions now, or of the maybe even an average. And don't get me wrong, but maybe like Bears now, that it's a team that it's not
Sure.
getting. But this is a question that it would be my last question today. Do you think that now with this expansion, this international expansion that the Bears are doing, maybe to Spain, to the UK, they will get more fans from places like Spain? That it would be a first chance or a first option, like, I'm coming to Spain, I'm becoming a Bears fan.
I mean, that's the plan, right? That's the whole point
Yeah,
of trying to divvy up the market, and why not? And honestly, the pitch to the Spaniards out there is that this is the original franchise. This is the team that's been around the longest. George Hallis is the original owner. He played, he coached. He's in the Hall of Fame. There's the reason why the NFL
really.
is what it
I,
is.
I, I didn't know that. I didn't know
Yep,
that George Callas was, and now the president that you have is
original.
the son, or it's family, it's family related with the actual owner and all these things, or not?
Yep. So George Hallis, he founded the team, as a player, coach, owner, and he started in 1920, founding the league, and he's instrumental in a lot of the advancements of the league, and he you can't write the story of the NFL without starting in the first chapter with George Halas and the Chicago Bears. And so that's it is the foundation. The colors are great.
Mhm.
Navy blue and orange looks
Yeah,
good. There's plenty of history. I've written plenty of history stuff, all these old programs behind me. I wrote a story about
yeah,
that artist. And there's a lot of stuff out there that's related to the Bears and is important. Yes, they are still family owned. That might not always be the case, but his George Halas's daughter, Virginia McCaskey, owns the team. She's near 100 years old. So she won't be around forever, but she is still around. She's been around for most of the history of the league and the Chicago Bears. Her son, one of her sons currently is the chairman of the board. But it's a great city. So in an easy one to travel to from Europe. I'm sure that there
yeah,
hopefully are direct flights,
yeah,
into O'Hare, so you could come over to a game at Soldier Field. Again, it's a city that loves its football, and so it's an easy one to me. It's an easy one to sell as a team that you can get in on. They're not going to win a ton of games this year, but they should be setting themselves up for success here in the next few years.
yeah. And of course, you have cool things like you said. The city, Chicago, is obviously one of the top cities in the U.S., really close to Europe. And you have a cool colors, like you said. The navy blue and the orange are colors that look really good. Are easy. They are not colors like maybe other teams that it's more complicated. It's like complete red and white that are boring colors. Colors that you see at all teams. In all the sports, red and white, red and orange, or red and orange, red and yellow. And but and the other thing you had is you had a cool logo as well. You have an animal that people loves. Bears normally people is like a lot of people goes to a team because of the logo. They like wearing a cap or a jersey from a team, like having a bear than having a cardinal, right? It's not a
Sure.
cool logo. I know what do you think about it, but this would be definitely my last question. A lot of people here in Europe, they say that they're going to be and they're Jaguars fans of the because of the Jaguars logo. Do you think accepting
No,
the
I've
Bears
never
is
met
the
a Jaguars fan, so I have no
really?
idea.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
they don't have there's any in the US. Maybe
that's
they're
very
all
much so.
no, or are all. It's true. I'm not going to mention that, but I know that Jacksonville is a place only for playing golf and for getting retired, maybe. But do you think that the Jaguars fan and being maybe a Jaguar fan, it's the coolest logo in the NFL?
I I
Complicated.
don't. I don't even think it's close, and there are no Jaguars in the US. Like, it's a
Yeah,
befuddling logo choice. It doesn't make any sense at all. They could have just been the Gators or something, but they
yeah, the
they
Gators
they
because they are Gators in Florida.
yeah, and then they're very close to the University of Florida, but they no, it's a stupid logo, to be honest with you. I don't like it at all.
Yeah, yeah. I was saying because I heard a podcast here. I was discussing, I think last year, and when you said that about logos and the verse is a really cool one, but they said that I don't know where, but the analysis what said that on a market study said that the Jaguars logo was the cooler or the coolest one. For me, I like cats. I like these animals. For me, it's a cool one. But maybe it's too much saying that it's the best one. But anyway, they are doing cool things in there. They have really complicated. What I read is they have a city almost empty of. It's a small city, Jacksonville. It's not a big city. It's not a beautiful city. They said, and people is not much for football. So the owner is thinking they wanted to bring the franchise outside of the NFL forever, but they didn't allow him. And I don't know who knows, but when he comes to Europe, I can tell you that the stadiums are full. People wearing
Sure.
Jack's, stuff, and people like this color, this green color. So what? It's not bad. But well, we're not going. Another day we can talk about the Jaguars, but they don't have a really positive season. But anyway, so that's I'm not going to take you more time. I appreciate really much your time. I think we can make another debate, another chat, in the future. For me, it was a pleasure, a really pleasure to be here today and talk with you. Time went really, really fast. I think you were, like super to us to bring to our fans, the fans that we had. We had like maybe I'm going to tell you an analysis, but there were moments we were having 10, 12 people connected, more. So we don't have a lot of fans, connected. We have a lot of fans then watching in another times. But let's see. For us, it was a pleasure to have you here, JB. We appreciate it really much. Thank you very much, and hope to have you soon again here.
Hey, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Enjoy your night, and
Yeah.
everybody have a good week. And thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, and see you soon. Para todos los fans, muchísimas gracias por los que os habéis conectado aquí. Volvemos al español. Muchísimas gracias a todos por los que habéis conectado, por vuestras preguntas, los que nos habéis lanzado preguntas por el chat. Nos seguimos viendo. Acordaros que ahora, en plazo corto, anunciaremos novedades chulas. Las primeras son el Fantasy de Fumble Show que haremos muy pronto, con muchas expectativas. Y el otro es el evento que haremos en Barcelona y seguramente también en Madrid, muy pronto, en bares chulos, ambientes, pantallas, análisis, comentarios, etcétera. Os esperamos a todos. Muchísimas gracias a todos por haberos conectado. Y nada más. Hasta la próxima. Que vaya muy bien. Adiós.